Thank you very much, Ceann Corla. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this debate. At present, immigration is one of the most pressing issues facing the international community, and we can see this across European member states, in the UK and within our own country. I therefore welcome the government's decision to opt in to the EU Migration and Asylum Pact, because I believe that this is not only a necessary agreement, but one will lead to a stronger, more robust and more responsive immigration system at home and abroad. And to that end, I want to pay tribute to the Department of Justice and indeed Minister McEntee and her officials for their efforts to date. We are already seeing the fruits of the labour that has been put into addressing the large number of asylum seekers that have entered Ireland over the last couple of years, with the increased number of international protection staff doubled and a number of decisions issued tripled. This is on top of the additional 100 Gardaí being provided to support immigration services and the 3,000 doorstep operations carried out on flights. And I would also like to note that the fines on carriers have been increased by 66%, which will help to ensure that passengers have the correct documentation when beginning their journey to Ireland. Whilst these, I should say, are positive developments, we must also recognise that the International Protection Act of 2015 is no longer fit for purpose. We must therefore ensure that we take the necessary steps in tandem with our European partners to improve our laws and our operational systems, because we cannot go it alone. I believe that this is vital, and that we also build a system that is substantially resourced with funding and staff in order to ensure that we have a system that is flexible and adaptable to circumstances that arise. I ask members to take themselves back just 3 years and look at the number of asylum applications then versus this year and last year. And I am pleased that the Department has plans to increase the requisite staffing and resources to this end in the time ahead. The world is changing around us. We are seeing an erosion of democracy around the globe, a rise in conflict, a rise in misinformation and disinformation, including here in Europe, and indeed sometimes even in this chamber. And we are faced with a weakened international order where international institutions we have relied upon for decades are being undermined. We are also living through a period of climate crisis. All indicators suggest that the world is not yet taking the decisions we need to take in order to limit the worst effects of climate change. And this will undoubtedly lead to greater pressure on immigration services, particularly within the European Union. In our interconnected world, we cannot fool ourselves into thinking that events in one corner of the world will not have consequences for our own. Again, I'd say we cannot go it alone. War and the impacts of war represent an enormous challenge to the international community, with the potential to see tens of millions of people on the move across multiple continents in the decades to come, including on our own continent. We must therefore ensure that our systems are not only able to adapt to the pressures of today, but that they are also future-proof to deal with major international events that may lie ahead. I believe that the EU Migration and Asylum Pact represents a positive shift towards this goal. By integrating information and processing systems, we can provide a much more effective method of providing help to those who need it, and processing who do not have the right to stay within this state. The reality is that we as an independent country cannot solve this challenge on our own. We must work with our EU member states. It is a facile, pointless and irrelevant argument to suggest that with the common travel area and with common movement across our EU member states, that we should somehow decide that parts of this pact don't suit us and that we should go it alone. By opting into this EU Migration and Asylum Pact, we will be in the position to return individuals to other EU countries as appropriate, that we simply cannot do if we choose to opt out. We cannot deal with an increased level of migration to the point where our system is nearly overwhelmed by going it alone or by cherry-picking elements of the pact that suit our political narrative. We have spent years negotiating all elements of this pact, so why would we not opt into measures we know will benefit us and which we help to negotiate? Those opposite keep talking about common sense approach, yet they have not made any suggestions as to what they would actually do, nor have they said what they would be constrained by within the pact, nor what they would do that they won't be able to do within the pact. And perhaps other speakers from the members opposite will set that out later, or perhaps not. We would, if we don't opt in, we would not be able to participate in the Eurodac database, which will hold information such as fingerprints, allowing us to accurately identify individuals as to where else they have been in Europe, again reinforcing our ability to determine that they should or should not reside within the state. And I would also like to note that the information will also be collected on children older than 6, and this will be a key step in preventing child trafficking and child exploitation, something which we must redouble our efforts on, and which something I know a number of members, particularly on the Justice Committee, have raised over the years that I've had the privilege of being a member of that committee. This aspect speaks to a wider need to ensure that broader matters of human trafficking is routed out, and those responsible for running criminal gangs dealing in the trade of other human beings are crushed, their profits seized, and the full force of the law brought to bear upon them. An Garda Síochána have a strong track record of working with international partners to tackle criminal gangs operating across international borders, and I believe that we must engage with partners with the goal, I should say, of preventing human trafficking within Europe. Cairn, I am very appreciative of the efforts currently underway and the continued progress Irish immigration services are making with regard to faster processing times of international protection applicants. I would also like to note the rapid processing system for those without documents is being developed apace. The EU Migration and Asylum Pact will see the harmonisation of these processing times across the EU bloc, and I believe that given our current progress in processing times, this will facilitate a seamless integration to the wider European framework. And ultimately, this will lead to stronger borders supported by a system that is responsive, efficient, and has the tools to identify where an individual should be accommodated. And on the question of accommodation, large-scale facilities that are set out by the Department of Integration are now needed more than ever. And while there have been some locations identified across the state, it is absolutely essential that we continue our efforts, both on this side of the House, but indeed on the opposite side, to engage with communities in a meaningful way, in a truthful and fair way, to inform them as to what has to occur in any given community, and where mistakes have been made in the provision of, for instance, hotel accommodation in certain places within the country, that we do our best to ensure that all communities are perhaps not overburdened. I know that every single county in this country has an asylum facility of some kind where we are accommodating those in international protection. And not just our friends from Ukraine, but from individuals from all over the globe. And it is a reflection of the global trends that those numbers will not decrease, but increase. And therefore, we must be able to facilitate in the most humane and appropriate environment those individuals that seek our protection. Cairn, the inclusion of the solidarity mechanism within the pact will present a pathway for countries to cooperate together with mandatory measures being imposed. And this is, in my view, a welcome inclusion that will allow our government to determine the best course of action for our people. I also recognise that there is a great deal of misinformation being disseminated about what this pact will mean for member states and indeed for Ireland. It is quite extraordinary, the level of misinformation and disinformation that is present, as I've referenced. And I would refer any persons watching this session of the Dáil to familiarise themselves with Sky News' recent survey of the source of a lot of online discussion on this matter, which showed that in regards to, I think it was the riots, for instance, that 80% of the information being disseminated was emanating from the UK, and that in relation to migration and those other instances that have occurred in recent time, that something like 90% of the information was being spread around outside of this state, which I find extraordinary, but those apparently are the facts that were available on the X platform. It is imperative that facts are heard and that people are not gaslit into believing that we're some sort of lawless society where anybody can enter unchecked. The reality is that we do have a robust system based on rules of law. The nature of the EU Migration and Asylum Pact will enhance our system and make it stronger and allow us more flexibility to address the challenges, whatever they might be. To opt out of this pact would make us weaker. It would limit the scope of our options when processing individuals, and despite what is being claimed in some corners of the internet, opting out of this pact would mean that we would become a more popular destination for those with invalid circumstances because of those lack of options. We would be unable to cope, and dare I say it, the 100 or so tents on a canal could potentially become thousands. I'd also like to highlight just some of the facts about our immigration system compared to this time last year. Undocumented arrivals in Ireland are down 14%. This figure is down 42% when compared to 2022. And this is all the more noteworthy during a time when we have seen an increase in 44% of all type of passengers. This shows that the operations carried out by An Garda Síochána, by Border Security and Immigration Services are working. Furthermore, this year we will have seen an increase of 83% in deportation orders as compared to this time last year. And enforcement of deportations are up 126%, while voluntary deportations are up 129% when combined with this time last year, both having more than doubled. Finally, Ceann Comhairle, I would like to take this opportunity again to thank the Minister for her work on this matter, and as a member of the Justice Committee, we have had the opportunity to discuss this matter with her and her officials, and I'm also pleased that this has been, I believe, of significant importance to the general debate that has been had over the last number of months. I look forward to working with colleagues on this issue and indeed delivering results that reflect our moral responsibilities in the interest of the Irish people. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle.